Hello, Stoned Apes, and others who are curious about the healing powers of psychedelic medicines. Welcome to the Stoned Ape Reports. I'm your host, Stuart Preston. Each episode, I talk to another Stoned Ape, somebody who has experienced the transformational powers of psychedelics, or with a practitioner who works with these medicines. In this episode, I had the pleasure of speaking with Ben. Ben shared his story of finding spirituality early on in life, but still having to deal with alcoholism, depression, even suicidal thoughts, and how he came to find help in plant medicines. While still on his journey, he now also helps others to integrate their plant lessons. Please enjoy this episode with Ben and his story. Ben, thank you for joining me here on the Stoned Ape Reports. I'm excited to have you. We got connected through a common friend, and we've had a couple conversations, and I'm excited to hear, your Stoned Ape story, as well as some of the awesome things you have going on in the plant medicine world. So why don't we just jump in and tell us, your story and what you may have been dealing with in life and the plant medicines and how that journey went for you.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. And thank you for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity and just appreciate what you're doing here with this podcast to give people an opportunity to speak about their experiences. And I think it's, especially in these times, this is a really important avenue for people to stay connected and stay open-minded. So thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. So I would say the spiritual part of my life journey, probably in my late teens, that's when I really feel I kind of started to open up to this perspective on life and living in the world. Kind of grew up in a pretty normal, quote unquote, family and in a place of my life and where I was raised. For all intents and purposes, I had a very normal life. And part of having a normal life is challenges and struggles and traumas and pain and loss.
Right.
And in my late teens, early 20s, I was exposed to some of the traditional shamanic practices, what we now refer to as traditional shamanic practices and shamanic cultures. And it really just opened up this whole world to me that up to that point I had no exposure to. And I really invested myself pretty deeply into learning more and learning what these practices are that our ancestors across the globe, each in their own way, studied and practiced and brought forward. And the foundation of it all, and what really resonated with me, was this understanding of earth wisdom, for lack of a better word. The idea and the concept that whatever we want to deem as spiritual or as divine is right here. It's in the soil beneath your feet. It's in the trees above your head. It's in the air that swirls around you. To be exposed to that at that age was like, oh, that makes sense. I get it.
Yeah.
That resonates, and it really just brought a perspective for me that was the first time that spirituality made sense, like the divine is here. And so it was very foundational for me. And right around that same time, late teens, early 20s, is also when I started to experience and start to have come up in my life some really challenging, deep felt traumas and pain at like, for what I would now call at like a soul level, a spiritual pain and spiritual suffering, kind of that feeling of like, what am I doing? And like, what is all this about? And what teenager has any grasp on really what that means? All I knew was like, there was this very deep, profound emptiness that I was experiencing. And of course, at that time in our culture, that's when they ship you off to college, or they ship you out. You're 18 now, time to be an adult and go out into the world. And it was a very, like the dichotomy between these two worlds that were being opened up to me. On the one hand, for the first time in my life, having a spiritual perspective that resonated. And on the other hand, being exposed to this world that did not feel good. It didn't resonate. It didn't, it wasn't offering the type of acknowledgement, recognition, support, understanding, that I really felt I needed at a soul level,
Yeah.
And through this, was when the first signs of some really profound and deep depression, clinical depression, from what these doctors were telling me I had, started to arise. And this, this real deep emptiness and loneliness was inescapable. And as I started to experience the symptoms of major depression more and more, and it was coming up in my capacity to, show up at school and connect with loved ones and feel joy and connection to things that were meaningful to me. I was, discovering that this is certainly something that my family has experienced long before me. This was something that kind of in the blood, in the genes,
Yeah. Yep.
And right around that time is when I started to really fall deeply into alcohol and started to experiment with drugs. And it was just this perfect storm of avoidance and suppression of emotions,
Yeah.
I became really skilled at avoiding what this deep soul feeling was trying to communicate to me. And I mean, I would say not only was I avoiding it, I didn't even know how to understand it. All I knew was that I felt empty, and these things that I was putting into my system seemed to have a temporary way to kind of quiet that emptiness.
Yeah.
And it also led to, this trouble that I was experiencing with feeling worthy to continue to explore this spiritual path that was opening up to me. And this was like, late 90s, early 2000s. So there weren't as many resources available at the tips of your fingers to go and explore, like shamanism or shamanic practices, or, different cultural approaches to shamanic traditions. I was basically left to whatever meager things I could find online or books. Thankfully there was a lot of really great resources out there. I mean, Sandra Ingerman was a lifeline for years, just reading a lot of her work, just to get an understanding of what a shamanic perspective can look like. And there was Hank Wasselman and other authors, and Carlos Castaneda was another really foundational source of material for me to just to learn, because there was nothing else out there for me. So now, through my 20s, this split just got further and further and further. And I didn't have much of a community, or there weren't a whole lot of people in my life that I felt safe to express these things to.
Yeah.
On either end of the spectrum, either this spiritual calling that I was exploring, or the depths of my pain and loneliness. I mean, I really had nobody to talk to. So there wasn't I didn't have solid footing in either side of this split.
Yeah.
And I moved around a bit. I grew up in New England, and then I traveled and moved to the West Coast, lived in Oregon for a while, and then traveled down to South Carolina, and in and out of relationships. And the sickness that I was experiencing of this depression brought me to some very, very dark places, very lonely, isolated places. And at this time in my life, I'd only, heard of plant medicines simply through my readings and my own kind of playing around with mushrooms and psychedelics. It certainly wasn't medicinal, and it certainly wasn't ceremonial. But it did, open up some of the doors that these plant medicines can offer. I just didn't have the context or the guidance to explore it any further. So really just in this place of being very lost, that I could hear that call. I could feel that aspect of myself that was pulling me towards something more meaningful, something more connected to a force greater than myself, a wisdom greater than myself, a love greater than myself. I just had no idea how to follow that.
But you felt a pull, like it was talking to you.
Yeah, it was certainly there. And the only thing that I could hold on to, like the only meager, tiny little thread that I could hold on to during this time, was this feeling of this wisdom, this consciousness, this love begins with the earth. It's when I'm out in the mountains or on the woods or by the beach, when I'm out in that nature space, that's when the call is the clearest. And it was all these attempts to continue to get back and just try to find it somewhere in those spaces, and then inevitably having to leave and come back into the matrix, for lack of a better word,
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until probably, let's see, at this point, like 7 years ago, that I had begun to find a little footing with, well, even longer than maybe 10 years by this point, started to find my footing in how to integrate this spiritual practice that was developing and bring it out of the closet, so to speak. I was doing a lot of this just in silence and in quiet and in isolation. I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't know how to bring it out. But by this point, I had started to connect with some like-minded people. I was living in South Carolina at this point. And, as it often happens, the universe just kind of puts the right people on your path at the right time. And that's what happened for me. And I suddenly found a place where I could feel safe to start to open this up just a little bit, actually have a conversation or two around what I do when I go out in the woods by myself, and why is it that on, the full and the new moon, I go down to the beach and do this little thing, and I can finally start to talk about this, and this person's not judging me or not kind of looking at me sideways or doing these things that I had learned were, if I'm getting this reaction, stop talking, hide it, shut it down,
Yeah.
And so this community started to develop, and I started to consistently find myself surrounded by people who were accepting and allowing of me to share and open up a little bit more. And this also was an opportunity, the first opportunity I had to start to share beyond just in conversation with close and like-minded people, but to actually start to offer classes and workshops on these things that I've been practicing for 12 years at this point. And I started to teach some of the real simple practices and techniques that I had learned over the time around shamanic journeying and connecting with earth medicine, and through, being out in nature and, following the seasons, working with the moon, and all of these just different practices that I had developed through my study, was now in the opportunity to share that with other people. And through this, the call's getting a little louder, and I'm able to hear that call a little more consistently. I'm still, at this point, still dealing with this serious depression that never seemed to really leave. I just learned how to manage it and how to navigate it, rather than kind of being constantly caught in the swells of this real deep and profoundly felt darkness.
Yeah.
It was still there. And the struggles that I was having with alcohol was still there, and I really had, at this point, I'm now 31 years old. I had resigned myself to the fact that alcohol is just going to be a part of my life.
Yeah.
I got it. The Irish curse, right? Like, just going to have to deal and hope that I don't get too many DUIs, or just really hope that I don't hurt anybody else. But I don't know. I've tried for 10 years at this point to shake this grip of alcohol, and it's stronger than I am. So I might as well just learn how to live with it. That was really what I had resigned myself to. And this community around me is developing. This practice is starting to take shape, and learning how, through teaching others, it deepens my own understanding of these practices, and deepen my own connection to these things, and really seeing how even in the midst of terrible pain and loneliness and brutal addiction, there is this sense of light and healing and hope found in a deeply felt spiritual practice, whatever it is.
Now, and just to be clear, the spiritual practice, is this purely a meditative spiritual practice, or is this aided by plant medicines at this point?
At this point, it's still the only medicines I was using was a drum and a rattle.
A drum and a rattle and full moon and new moon,
Yep.
and your presence.
That's right. And I had really appreciated at that time the work of, and I mentioned like Sandra Ingerman, Michael Harner, Christina Pratt is another just brilliant contemporary shamanic practitioner. She was actually the first podcast that I started listening to, like, I don't know, 12 years ago. She still does it once a week. It's called Why Shamanism Now. And that, these resources and these wisdom keepers that were sharing their knowledge, the primary focus of their information was like the essential tools and practice of shamanism. Didn't really get too lost in and I say this with compassion, like the woo-woo side of things. They were very grounded, really grounded materials. And for me at that time, that's exactly what I needed. And in a lot of ways, their perspective is plant medicine is important, but it's not the only way. And that was really helpful for me because I didn't have the access or opportunity to explore plant medicine at that time. So that's really what helped create the foundation of my spiritual practice. And that's what I was teaching, like shamanic journeying techniques, different ways to utilize something as simple as a drum to get your consciousness to a meditative state wherein you are open and receptive to the wisdom within and without, and how to develop that practice consistently, reliably, learn how to navigate your spiritual landscape. One of the most beneficial parts of the shamanic journeying practice for me is that it allows me to experience and interact with my own symbolic, metaphorical language, because the worlds that are opened in that type of meditation, what distincts shamanic journeying from something of kind of what is often thought of as meditation, which is to quiet the mind, still the thoughts, allow the thoughts to come and go. Shamanic journeying, it's engaging with your imagination. It's allowing yourself to open up the capacity that our imagination has and do so with the understanding that imagination isn't make-believe. We're not just making these things up. Our imagination is what spirit uses to talk to us. And so naturally, spirit is going to use the images, the memories, the feelings, the emotions that resonate. And the more that we can communicate and dialogue with spirit in that way, the more we understand and are able to interpret our own metaphorical language, our own mythology, our own spiritual language. So that's what I taught, and it was received really well, and it helped me understand how this practice, the importance of having a grounded practice like this that actually provides you the opportunity to open up that imaginary landscape. And do so with respect and reverence for what it really is, instead of this feeling of like, oh, I'm daydreaming, or I'm making all this up.
Right.
And so in that time and in the space that I was in South Carolina, I was living in Charleston at this time, this beautiful community. And I had a number of people at this point who were asking me and talking to me about, have you ever experienced ayahuasca? Have you ever gone down to Peru and done this? And at that time it was, nope, I haven't. Really my own experiences were with mushrooms, here and there, but nothing really with any sort of spiritual or ceremonial context. And I started to research a bit more, and certainly I was curious about it. And I remember, Michael Harner's first book, Way of the Shaman, kind of opens with his experience with ayahuasca in the 60s or 70s. So I was aware of it. For me, it seemed like, well, it's all well and good, but it's nothing I could ever do. I mean, I'm just this, white kid from Rhode Island. That's like a very respected and revered and sacred medicine for a people that I am not. And I don't want to be another gringo traipsing all over this indigenous culture, gobbling it up and making it my own. I felt a very strong aversion to doing that. But it kept coming, again, that message, that feeling just kept coming back into my awareness. And finally, someone who I really respected, a good friend of mine down there in Charleston, who I really respected. And I looked at him as someone who does this with integrity. He walks his walk with integrity. And he was sharing with me an experience that he just had in Peru of his own, going and sitting with ayahuasca in a traditional ceremonial context. And to hear him talk about it, I was like, wait a minute, he's not just another gringo going down there, being a rude American scooping it up, maybe there is an opportunity to explore this for myself. And sure enough, not soon after that, the opportunity came to go and sit in a traditional Shipibo style ceremony in the States. And it was with, another person that I really respected and valued and honored the way that they practice their own spiritual medicine. And so it felt like, all right, here's an opportunity, and again, when the universe puts these opportunities in front of us, there's no right or wrong answer. There's only, we can only move towards or away from the direction that the universe is already moving us.
Yeah.
And it really felt like it's kind of been building up to this over the course of the last 12 years, that I had been engaged in some sort of spiritual practice.
Yeah. Hearing you talk about it sounds like a very purposeful path that was kind of laid before you.
Yeah. It felt really orchestrated, and looking back now, it's almost like, of course, duh. Like where else could this have gone?
Right.
So I traveled to where the ceremony was being held, and it was over the course of 4 nights, 5 days and 4 nights in this traditional Shipibo style ceremony. The Shipibo is it's a region of eastern Peru along the Amazon that has carried on their tradition and practice with the medicine for thousands of years that we know of. And so it's really a deeply rooted tradition with this medicine. This wasn't a few people from Burning Man who happened to get some online and cooked it up in their kitchen. This was a very traditional approach to it. And I didn't really, I purposefully tried to avoid watching much or doing a whole lot of research about, what the Shipibo style ceremony is, or, I saw that there was some material online. This was like 2014, 13. So, I mean, at this point, there's YouTube videos and things available, but I tried to keep my awareness of it pretty light so I could keep my expectations, to not have expectations.
Yeah. Pretty smart.
Yeah. So, and by this point, I would hazard a guess most people listening to this have an idea of kind of what the ayahuasca experience is like in a lot of ways, but it's in the traditional Shipibo style. Like many ayahuasca traditions, it's done at night, and it's done the major approach along with the medicine is the use of singing. In their culture, they're called ikaros, which are medicine songs. The concept of which in their tradition is that through years, decades of discipline and study and reverence and work with the medicine, these shamans develop an affinity with not just with ayahuasca, but with the master plants of the jungle that all work in concert together. And there is a practice in these traditions that in the Western world we call diets or dietas, which are very, very restrictive and intentionally isolating experiences where it's just the practitioner and the plant over a course of many, it could be weeks, could be months, could be years. And through these diets, the shaman learns in a way to embody the plant and be a conduit for the plant to bring its medicine out into these ceremonies through the use of song. And the song is really just one function of it is to create the vibration of the plant's energy and medicine through the rhythm and the tone and the sound that the shaman makes through the song. It transmits this medicine and this energy that is then directed through the words the shaman uses in the traditional Shipibo language to direct and guide and, help transmit that energy of medicine through the song.
Right.
And so the ceremony is sitting in the dark for the most part with the most incredible noises you've ever heard in your life. Sometimes it's like the most beautiful melodies and harmonies, and other times it's like, I don't know what dimension this language is, but it's not this one. And, we could do a number of podcasts just about those 4 nights, just those. But what I would say is that the experience I walked away from what I walked away from in that experience was, for the first time in my life, feeling that connection, that voice, that pull that I had been experiencing my whole life finally come from inside me instead of something outside of me.
Yeah.
And seeing firsthand that this longing, this loneliness, this unnameable feeling that I was searching for is inside. And that was it. It didn't tell me anything more. That was really, okay, now what do I do with this? All right, now in some ways it almost feels even more excruciating, because now I'm not outside myself looking for it. Now it's wherever I go.
Yeah.
There's this feeling, and, but there was such a profound and undeniable shift that took place in that experience where, up until that point, it was my belief that the pain, the suffering, the addiction, the loneliness, the hurt, the trauma, that was all me. The medicine, the spirit, the connection I felt to the earth, the reverence that I held to this spiritual practice, that was outside of me. And I need to get rid of all of this. And it's all of these things, I can't stop drinking, and I'm punishing myself, and I hate the way I look, and I hate the way I feel. Like, all of this stuff is what's preventing me from connecting to that thing outside of me, that at the end of those 4 days, it was the understanding that true light, that true spirit, that true voice, it's not outside of me. It is in the center. It's in the depths and the center of my being. And all of that other stuff are just these ugly old layers between this conscious self that's looking at this and that sense of spirit. And so, all right, what do I need to do to get these layers out of the way?
Yeah.
And so, for the first 2 or 3 or 4 years after that, I went back to this place where I went for the ceremony regularly, every couple months. And that, and I still didn't, and I would come back to South Carolina and connect with the community and talk with people. And there was certainly a level of support that was there, but there was also, it was also a lonely experience, because as anyone who has attended any of these ceremonies, whether it's over the course of a couple nights or down in the jungle for weeks or months at a time, there is this incredible sense of connection and community that is felt with the group in that weekend or in that that retreat or in that long-term experience. Like, you develop such a deep and soul felt connection to these brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers and sons and daughters that you're journeying with in these ceremony experiences, that when you leave, when I left and I came home, even the closest people in my life, it felt like there was this sense of separation, this division that I couldn't quite bridge. I could share and I could open up and talk about my experiences, and I was always well held and supported. But these are people who hadn't experienced this medicine themselves. They didn't really have an understanding of what I was talking about or what I was experiencing. And I'm sure to some of them, they were like, well, he's lost his mind. It was a good run. We had a good time, but whoop, he's gone now.
Yeah.
So that really began to instill in me how just the true essential importance of a integration practice, or some kind of integration opportunities to integrate your experience with people who understand, at least in their own way, what you're going through,
Right.
And really, and it's said so often now that it's kind of cliche, but it's like the real ceremony doesn't even begin until you leave that maloka, That's, it's one thing when you're in that space with the medicine and you're hearing these beautiful icaros and all, your oneness with all, or maybe you're ear deep in a bucket, letting out 10 lifetimes worth of trauma. That's one thing. But now when it's Tuesday morning and you're going to work and you're going to go run into this coworker you don't get along with too well, or, a Thursday afternoon when you're struggling with that significant other, like, that's where the medicine is the most potent. It's just, are we able to connect to it? And so I started to just see for myself how essential that integration piece is in the whole experience, and how lacking it was in my life at that time. Because at this point, I'm still very much struggling with this depression, struggling with this alcoholism. And because I didn't have a network of support, I was learning for myself how to take these tools that I had spent the last 10 plus years developing, the shamanic practice, this connection to the earth, this work with following the seasons through the year, and, understanding the moon and the moon cycles and connecting to that in a real way. Before, it was always just it felt like an intellectual pursuit in a lot of ways. It was interesting, and it had me think interesting things. And, I was able to kind of step out of the feelings of pain and loneliness in my life for a couple hours every week and go do these fun things in the woods and, journey and connect with my spirit guides. But at some point I had to come back to the reality, which is I'm a hurt and broken being who is having to just pull everything together just to get out of bed some days. But after this ayahuasca experience, I couldn't use that as an excuse anymore, because there was no difference. There was no separation between this spiritual practice and the really deeply felt pain that I was experiencing.
Kind of pulled out that layer.
Right. And so it was like, all right, now this is no longer an intellectual pursuit. I have been, if I truly believe these things that I'm telling myself, which is, the divinity that I pray to is all around me, even inside, that the universe is constantly advocating on my behalf, that there is this deeply felt connection to this ground beneath me. Well, now it's time to put that, put my money where my mouth has been this whole time, and look at these experiences, this depression and this alcoholism, and approach it from this place of, all right, if this is healing work that I'm doing, then what am I doing to heal myself? And it was over the course of, I would say, 2 years or so of just really of consistent practice and going into these ceremonies with the single-minded, like the focused intention of what is this? Like where is this depression? What is this that's bringing me this sense of, at times, just self-destruction, if not complete and total and final self-destruction, at least a lot of little self-destructions, consistently choosing patterns and behaviors that hurt myself. And again, this could be a whole series of podcasts on their own.
Right.
But what the experience was each and every time, the medicine, like slowly and surely, constantly turned my perspective back to that light, back to this understanding that this love, this acceptance, this appreciation that I have been constantly reaching outside of myself for, the greatest source of it is inside. No one will ever be able to love me in the way that I love myself, or I have the potential to love myself.
Yeah, that's powerful.
And to slowly turn that, it was kind of like, it's turning a battleship, in an ocean of molasses in a lot of ways. But to constantly come back to that truth, that in order to even begin to appreciate and accept and receive the love that is outside of me, that is constantly being offered through friends, through loved ones, through experiences, through the ground beneath my feet, constantly saying you are loved and you are worthy. Before I can even begin to hear that, what if I can hear it for myself and from myself first? And each and every way showing, like, here, and I found this to be true, that, when I would go in with the intention, say, I want to learn about self-love. All right, let's keep it broad, kind of shoot for the moon. I want to learn about self-love in this ceremony. Invariably, the entire ceremony would be all about ways that I don't allow myself to do that in the first place. It wasn't, these experiences of all my beautiful aspects and all these wonderful things and all of the greatness that I am. The medicine instead would show me all the ways that I don't allow myself to believe that. And I'm sure you can imagine those weren't very fun. Some people were telling me stories about they were riding the anaconda through the jungle, or I went to other dimensions, and wow, it sounded great. Meanwhile, I had spent the last 2 nights rolling around in all the things I'm most ashamed of. And I was like, man, why can't I drink what you're drinking? It sounds way better than what they're giving me. But of course, the lesson for myself in those experiences were, in each and every one of those, when I had to go and look straight in the eye, those parts of myself that caused me the most shame and guilt and blame, and to sit there and say, I'm sorry that I experienced that. I'm sorry that I did that to myself. I forgive myself for putting myself in a place where I thought the only solution was to end it all. Wow. I must have really been in pain. And no wonder, like, I've learned to just live with my pain at a 7, maybe an 8 out of 10, and just learn. And I can show up, I can go to work, I can sit across from you and have a whole conversation and make people laugh and have a great time and be at birthdays and, let this old lady cross the street. And at the same time, be a few thoughts away from total annihilation. And through this gradual process, night after night, ceremony after ceremony, was this slow and steady reflection back within, that this is where this love and this acceptance and this forgiveness that I'm reaching out for across the whole globe, across the universe to find, it's right here. And how can I begin to open up those pathways for that truth at the center of my being to come up to this surface and get around and get through and move aside these layers of guilt and shame and blame that I have accumulated.
Yeah.
And so that was, that probably if I were to kind of divide my medicine years, that was like that was the introduction phase of my medicine experience.
Wow. That's quite an introduction.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it felt like lifetimes, and other times it was like, really having the opportunity to appreciate how supremely intelligent and wise and patient the medicine is.
Yeah.
And there would be times where I would leave on that Sunday and be like, I got it. I figured it out. Oh man, it's all set. It's going to be easy street from here. And Monday afternoon, I'm all the way back down doing the same thing, and just thinking like, I'm never going to get through this. I'm never going to get through this. But then I would look and I'd be like, wait a second. I've gone 5 days now without a drink. Wow. I've gone a month now and I haven't even wanted a drink. And it happened in a such a subtle way, where it was, one morning was it was on a Friday. I remember this distinctly. Friday I'd work on Fridays. Friday afternoon or evening, there would be workshops at this metaphysical center that I was going to, still living in Charleston at this time. And they'd be different things, meditations and channelings and, community events. And every Friday, as soon as those would end, I would leave, walk up the street, go to the bar, get my old fashioned and settle in for the night. And it was like clockwork. I mean, you could just follow my day every Friday in that order: work, home, go to the meditation, achieve this sense of bliss and this oneness, and I feel good. And then, all right, okay, time to get a drink. And when I started to really invest deeply into this healing with ayahuasca, the discomfort that was coming up on those Friday afternoons, when I knew like the meditation was, all right, we got about 15 minutes left. I kind of knew what the rhythm of these meditations were. And I knew it was getting close to the end, and I could feel like, now I'm going to go get a drink. Shit, I don't want to get a drink.
Yeah.
And I know I'm going to. And just that frustration, that anger turned inwards of like, I'm going to do something I know I don't want to do, and I can't do anything about it, and it's excruciating. And then it was almost like my body, it was as if my mind was saying no, and my legs were like, that sounds great, but here we go, have a seat. And and there was this one Friday afternoon, the meditation was coming to an end, and I was just in this really kind of thoughtful place, and the leader called us all back and had a few closing words and said, all right, we'll have a good night. We'll see you back here next Friday. And got up and I left, and I walked down. If you've ever been in Charleston, there's the Battery, which is at the end of Charleston Island. And this is beautiful little park by the water. And I just walked down to the Battery and just lounged around there, sat on the bench and watched the sunset and watched the birds, and then walked up Meeting Street or Bay Street, East Bay Street, and walked up and just kind of wandered through the alleys a bit and made it back to my place and sat down and put on some music. And then I was like, holy crap, what am I doing here? It's 8:30 on a Friday night, and I'm sitting here listening to some of my favorite music in my apartment. And I just had I just like leaned back and just cried and was just so grateful. And it wasn't like this conscious, I had to rip myself away, go to the other side of the street away from my favorite bar. No, it's just like from within, I was guided back home,
Wow.
And that, I kind of look at that as when my relationship to the medicine shifted, because that was such a profoundly healing experience. I mean, like I said before, I had resigned myself to the fact that I will drink minimum 5 nights a week for the rest of my life. gonna happen.
Right.
You know, I at least don't drink at breakfast. I mean, hey, I'm not that bad, but like,
Right.
this is what it's going to be. Two, over the course of about a year and a half, 2 years of working with this medicine, it wasn't even a thought. Whatever program had been installed, benwilldrink.exe, was deleted and removed.
Wow.
And to this day, I mean, there's nothing. I'm one of the few people at the Irish wedding that drinks water, you know? And
wow, that's incredible.
and that it demonstrated the depths and the potential of the healing that this, and it's not just the medicine, you know, it's not that liquid in the glass that does it. You know, one thing I've learned that's true for me is that these plant medicines don't heal. These plant medicines open up the opportunity and guide us to heal ourselves. They offer the perspective that we can't see or have a very difficult time seeing for ourselves, where to make that other choice, how to react in a different way, how to respond instead of reacting at all.
Yeah.
You know, that these aren't magic potions that poof, you're fixed. They're lenses, they're perspectives. They're that other voice to offer a different option when you're looking at these things in our life that seem insurmountable. They offer, what about this way? What does it look like if you go this way? And invariably, when you go that way, it leads you deeper inside yourself, where you have to confront these deeper layers of guilt and shame and blame and regret and longing and resistance, all of these things that we hold for ourselves.
And you have to do that work.
You have to.
That's the work you have to do. It shows you what you have to do, but you have to go do that work.
Exactly. And the good thing is that there isn't a time limit, or there isn't. Nobody's getting graded on how well they do the work. The only thing that matters is, are you going to do the work? And I know plenty of people, and I was one of them for many years, who saw what the work was. I was like, I'll pass. I can't. I'm not going to. I choose not to. And that's okay. And for some people, and I think that, you know, this is the medicine comes into our lives in a way that is relevant to where we are at that time. Mm-hmm. And for some people, medicine work will not be this deep healing, go back to those original core traumas and deal with them. For some people, medicine work is the experience, you know, this work with whatever it is, ayahuasca or psilocybin or whatever, you know, name any of them. Not everybody is willing, able, or interested to dive into the depths, and that's okay. And the medicine will meet you where you're at. But if you want to go to the depths, you're going to have to do the work, you know?
Yeah. And is that something, I know you talked about with the drums and the shakers and the moons, that you would teach and help people? Is that something you're still doing?
Yeah. And what I found the most, kind of getting back to what I said earlier, was all of that work with shamanic journeying. It helped me understand my own spiritual or metaphorical or mythological language. It taught me how to understand the ways in which spirit, through my psyche, communicates to me. The images, the memories, the metaphors. And when we go into these psychedelic spaces through these medicines, that's the world we're going into. You know, it's this visionary landscape is individual to each and every one of us. Mm-hmm. And so what I found the most benefit was, wow, I'd spent 12 years learning how to speak this language before I even entered this space in this way. And that it helped me from the very beginning understand ways to navigate those spaces. And when I would, you know, and it's like it trained my vision muscle, you know, trained my third eye, I would say. And so I had like a real natural capacity to open up to the visionary spaces that are a potential. Not everybody has visions, and that's okay. for those that do, the visions can be really crazy, super chaotic, really wild. And if we don't have a foundation or an understanding of the way that we interpret and engage in this symbolic language, I liken it to going to a foreign city. Say I want to go to, I don't know, Rome. Can't go anywhere right now, but if I could go to Rome, I'd go there by myself. I don't speak Italian. I don't have a map. I'll have a beautiful time. I'll go see some wonderful things. I see the Colosseum. I kind of know what that's about.
Yeah.
Now, say I go to Rome with a guide. Still don't speak Italian, but they at least speak English, and they can interpret and kind of offer some perspective and communicate to me in a way to have a bit of a deeper understanding. Now, say I go to Rome. I've learned Italian. I've done a little bit of study, and now my experience of that place will be even more deep and meaningful. Same with the visionary landscape. If we don't have an understanding of the way that spirit talks to us, we can have a beautiful time, but the depths to which we're going to be able to go into those spaces is limited. If we have an understanding of really simple, basic concepts about like, how do I interpret and engage in my own symbolic language? What are some really simple and basic tools around grounding, clearing your energy, centering and focusing into your body? Really simple techniques, but are essential in order to explore these depths that we're talking about. Otherwise, we can go into these places and have profound experiences, and we can come back with what we can, but we come back with what we can.
Yeah.
And so that's really where I found and what I offer in my teachings now is how to utilize and work with these shamanic tools as a way to provide those tools when we go into these spaces.
Yeah.
And it's like any other muscle. Our spirit is a muscle. The more we work it out, the stronger it gets, the more that we can rely upon it in times of stress. And so that's really what I have found to be a really essential practice. And for so many people who are coming into this, who are being exposed to entheogens and these traditional medicinal practices, this is their first experience with anything, and we're so fortunate and should hold in our heart deep gratitude for all the pioneers that went out there and did the hard work and went down into the jungle without all the amenities that we have down there now, or who did these real deep explorations, the real original psychonauts. We are tremendously indebted to all of their hard work. And it is also incumbent upon us to be responsible within which how we continue their work now.
Yeah. That's a great point.
And so I think that's a key part of our contemporary psychedelic experience is, some people are going to be psychonauts, and psychonauts are, the exploration that's available in those ways and within these medicines is infinite. And there is an opportunity to explore these worlds with an understanding and appreciation and a reverence for the traditions within which they have made their way to us. And for me, that's another part. I spoke a moment ago about, how that my work with plant medicine shifted after that experience of releasing the grip that alcohol had on me. The way it shifted was that I dove more deeply into the Shipibo tradition and the practice. And I really, because there's a number of different traditions that practice ayahuasca and have carried on the ayahuasca tradition and the medicine. And for me, the Shipibo is one that resonated the most deep. And I've spent the last, basically from that time till today, studying and practicing with the Shipibo maestros and maestras that have been open and kind and compassionate enough to offer their tradition to those of us outside of the lineage.
Yeah.
And for me, the greatest benefit that these traditions offer, it's like a framework. It's the structure within which to explore,
Mm-hmm.
we go
Yeah, really
hiking,
creating that set and setting all in one
right?
amazingly designed experience.
Exactly. Because these are practices that have been handed down for thousands of years. They've worked out some kinks.
Yeah,
They've learned the landscape a little bit. They
yeah,
kind of understand where some of the pitfalls are, and justly and rightly so. There is some concern to just give yourself completely to a tradition or a practice. Yeah, I mean, there's bad eggs in every culture across the world,
right.
but to not just throw out the whole tradition because of some people who have abused their place as a healer or a teacher.
Yeah,
And for me in the Shipibo tradition, what really resonates with me is that and it's through those ikaros, right? Through those medicine songs, the greatest
mm-hmm.
healers that I've seen, the greatest curanderos and curanderas are those that were completely and totally invested and committed to being that conduit for the healing in that moment. And this is my experience of it. In the Shipibo tradition, those songs, those ikaros, they're not songs in the way that we might often think of a song where it's got
Right.
lyrics and a beginning, a middle, and end, and you can sing the song and it sounds good and you can kind of tweak it or whatever. An ikaro is it's sung in that moment, singing to what is present in the room, or sing what is present in that patient, that pasajero that sits in front of them. And so in a real way, the same ikaro is never sung twice.
Right.
Because it's what is present in that moment with the dedication and the commitment to helping that person.
Yeah.
This person
Yeah.
is in pain. They're in suffering. What can I do to help them right now? And then in that space of reverence and prayer, going in and connecting to this incredible garden of medicine that healer has acquired and gathered over the many decades of practice, through the diets, through their connection to ayahuasca, through their connection to the other master plants that they have devoted themselves to. They become a conduit for all this medicine to come out with the sole and express purpose of helping that person.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty magical.
Yeah. It's not a concert,
Right.
It's not this those Malokas down there in Peru where they do these, they're emergency rooms. It's a jungle hospital down there.
Right.
And it's through just witnessing over years, consistently going down there and spending time and just observing the level and the depth to which these people have dedicated themselves to this practice.
Yeah.
That's really what continues to open up for me my own practice, and my own connection, my own personal relationship with this medicine and with the diets that I have practiced over the years and the ways that I have learned to navigate these spaces. It all comes back to that intention, that clarity of purpose, which is I am here to be the clearest channel I can be to help that person.
Wow. Wow, that's beautiful. And I've got a couple more questions for you, but in your journey, once you transitioned into the plant medicines here, you mentioned how in your spiritual journey in the beginning, you had a hard time finding people you could talk to about it. Mm-hmm. Has it been the same with plant medicine? Have you been able to talk about these journeys and your experiences and the things you're doing today with friends and with family and other people? Have you felt a stigma as a result of that?
Yeah, no, I haven't. If anything, it's the further I go with this medicine, the more me I become. The more opportunity I find in the everyday to be myself. The masks, I think in one way or another, we're going to carry these masks in some shape or form for our whole time here. I don't think anyone can be 100% authentic 24 hours a day. And that's not the point. But for me, in my experience, is how can I bring me into my life more fully. And a few years ago, I had left Charleston and I moved out to Phoenix, Arizona, where I'm at now. And medicine has a funny way of just kind of bringing, it kind of like collects people together, and you kind of like spot each other in a crowd. You're like, you've definitely, you drank a couple things in your day. And people kind of, the opportunities for connection and community begin to expand exponentially the deeper that you go into the work. And so when I came out here to Phoenix, didn't know anybody, just me and my cat wasn't much for conversation, still isn't. But I was, now at this point, I had been working with this medicine for 5 years or so, 4 or 5 years, and had a real, at this point have been practicing diets and really exploring deeply, and all the while still that truth that I got from my first experiences of the importance of integration and the necessity for a safe space and a safe community to be able to express this. It is essential, otherwise, again, it's going to limit the capacity for depth and exploration and healing. Yeah. And so when I came to Phoenix, I had, by this point, I had a number of years of seeing what healthy community looks like. These ceremonies that I was going to, and by this point, I was going to a number of different ceremonies across the country in places that I had been connected to. And it was the same thing, supportive, nurturing, caring people who wanted to hold that space and wanted to not only have the space held for them to do their exploration, but to return the favor. And so I knew what it felt like to me to be in a healthy, safe community. And so now it was like, all right, how can I bring that here for myself? And it really didn't take that long, honestly. I kind of gotten involved in the community in Phoenix. There's many spiritual communities here, and some stores and centers around the city that are just do such a phenomenal job of offering a place of safety and acceptance when it comes to these things. So I started there and began to meet some other people, and by this point, this is 2015. By this point, it's global. Everyone knows about ayahuasca.
Right.
Documentaries are out by this point.
Yep.
And, so it didn't have to be so hush-hush about it. And I started to, find myself in the company of similarly dedicated, compassionate, curious healers for themselves and for others. And, that type of connection accumulates the healing for everybody, rising tide raises all ships, and certainly true in the healing practices as well. So, and then 2 or 3 years ago, I, seeing these great resources in this wonderful community that's here in Phoenix, wanted to organize it for myself a little bit more intentionally. And, at this point, we're spending time together in, gatherings and potlucks and small ceremonies and big ceremonies. And I was feeling like, I think we could also benefit from some dedicated and organized integration practices, whether it's like an integration group, integration meetings, whatever it looks like, but really put some intention and intentionality behind it. And I, with the help of some other people in the community here, began organizing regular integration circles for people coming from all experiences. Didn't have to be just plant medicine, wherever your spiritual path is taking you. We all need to sit and to speak and be heard, and listen and hold space. Doesn't matter what you're doing. That's fundamental. And so I've spent the last couple of years with the help of some wonderful people in this community, people, real talented, gifted medicine people, to expand and continue to offer these opportunities for each and every one of us to sit and speak and listen and be heard. And now it's interesting times now for many reasons.
Right.
Because, kind of the state of the world right now is one of this distancing. And at the same time, in many ways, we've seen this sense of community and support be stronger than ever. And so, yeah, that's kind of where the focus is on my own work now, is to continue my own study first and foremost, because I was able to slay one dragon, the drinking dragon.
Right.
And dragon of depression is my own belief, and this could change. Who knows? I could do a few more ceremonies and see something else. But I've come through this leg of my journey to have an appreciation for that experience, appreciation for this capacity that I have to fall into some very deep, dark holes.
Yeah.
And because it's in the pain where the greatest medicine is going to be found. And so that I think I'll always be navigating that landscape, and the world will continue to provide opportunities for me to feel alone, and me to have to navigate these feelings, these intensity of the emotions, the depths of our feelings can take us into some far out places.
Sure can.
And, over the course of a spiritual practice, I really feel like the purpose of a spiritual practice is not only to achieve some sort of like heightened state of consciousness, or achieve some sort of, or surpass the realm of opposites. Yes, for sure. And the purpose of a spiritual practice is to provide tools and perspectives to navigate your day, to offer you an opportunity to look past the immediacy of your experience, whatever it is, good, bad, or indifferent, and see a bigger, broader picture to it. Connect yourself to the depths of this earth that's beneath us. See yourself in the cosmos overhead, and see that whatever is happening in front of you right now is part of a much larger, broader picture.
Yeah.
And through that spiritual practice, whatever it is, all right, well then how do you take your next step?
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And that's probably a good place to stop, but I want to give you one last chance is there anything else you want to put out there or get out there or share before we wrap up?
Sure. Well, once again, just thank you for doing this and providing the space. And I would say I'm in the final steps, but every time I say that, there seems to be a few more steps that pop up. So I'm in the process of getting my own podcast and online presence to further kind of what I've been talking about here, a lot of these tools and practices, and offer opportunities for people, myself included, to share their stories just like you're doing so well. So it's a work in progress, but the website is originalmythology.com. That'll also be the title of the podcast. Not a whole lot there right now, just a pretty background picture and some text. But that's where I'll be kind of launching the podcast and opportunities for teaching, and some online programs that I'll be making available. And also, if through the Facebook, we have, as I mentioned, this integration community that is here in Phoenix. Our Facebook page is simply called Phoenix Integration Community, and it's open to anybody, whether you're in Phoenix or not. Anyone is welcome to join and to be a part of it. So
I'm a member. I recommend it. If you're listening, go join that.
Awesome. So that's it. I again really appreciate kind of what you're doing in this time, how important it is to allow people the opportunity to share where they're at and express themselves in a way that perhaps offers an opportunity for someone else to be healed through it. So thank you.
And thank you for coming and sharing your story. It's the stories like yours that I think are going to have that impact And I'm very excited for your podcast. I will look out for that, and I'll keep the link on this podcast so people can find it from here.
Great.
And just, Ben, thank you so much for sharing all that. That was really great information, and I'm truly honored to have you here.
Likewise. Thank you so much. I look forward to doing this again. I'll have you on mine.
All right. That sounds good.
Okay.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
That concludes this edition of the Stoned Ape Reports. Thank you for listening. Please follow us on Instagram at Stoned Ape Comedy and subscribe to our newsletter at www.stonedapecomedy.com. Again, thanks for listening, and catch you next time, Stoned Apes.